Hi, welcome back to the Martini Waitress channel. Today we're going to be talking about all the math and numbers that you need to know to train for an NRA competition. First, we'll talk about the two different ways you can score your accuracy at the range. The first is using an NRA target paper, and the second is using metrics from the Ballistics app. And then we'll talk about details on the precision pistol competition, which happens every July in Indiana, specifically the course of fire, as well as the different templates that are used. So let's start with how to score NRA papers. The first step is to go buy these papers. These papers are sold in packs of 100 for $25, so they cost 25 cents each. The second step is to hang it at the distance that it prescribes. So this is the B3 template, and it has to be hung at 50 feet in order for the score to be valid. And the third step is to fire 10 rounds at it. And now we can start calculating. So each round is assigned a value based on which ring it lands on the paper. So the rings in the center are worth the most, and the rings on the outside are worth the least. And you add them all up to get your score. To get a perfect score of 100, you would have to get the center ring of 10 all 10 times. You'll notice that I have more than 10 rounds in here. Actually, I have 20. I do 2 magazines per paper just to save paper and math, but I do adjust for the score by dividing it by 2 to arrive to the average over there. The second way of scoring your paper is using metrics from the Ballistics app, and this app is available on the iOS as well as Android app stores. First, you take a picture of your target paper, and then you launch the app, and then you browse for your target paper on your camera roll to import it into the app. After you import it, the first thing you have to do is establish a size reference. So I've established 12 inches as my size reference because that's the length of my target paper for the B3. And you can change that reference size in the settings. And then you tell the app the distance in yards, and you also select the caliber that you used. The next step is to choose the center of aim, and then you have to mark all the points of impact. If any of your rounds miss the paper, just mark them in the furthest corner away. And finally, the moment of truth. These are the metrics that are generated by the Ballistics app. The top half of the screen are metrics that come with the $10 version of the app, and the bottom half of the screen has metrics that are only available if you upgrade to the $20 version of the app. But I do recommend that you upgrade to the $20 version because my favorite metric, CEP, circle error probable, is in the bottom half of the metrics. Let's go over what all these metrics mean. Group size refers to the diameter of the smallest hypothetical circle that can be drawn that would contain all of your shots. And with this metric, just like all the other metrics on the screen, smaller is better. My group size can be expressed as 11.1 inches or 62.7 arcmans. And we'll go over arcmans in detail later. Arcmans just means 1/60th of a degree. The next two metrics, overall width and overall height, refers to the total vertical or horizontal range of all your shots. ATZ is for rifle users. ATZ refers to adjustment to 0, and they're just absolute values of the next two metrics, elevation and windage. Elevation tells you if your shots are too north or too south of the target. Here, my elevation is negative 2.08 inches, and you can visually confirm from my target paper that my shots are too south. If my elevation number was positive, that would mean that my shots are too north. Windage tells you if your shots are too left or too right of the target. Here, my windage is positive 0.81 inches, and you can visually confirm from my target paper that they are too much on the right. If my windage number was negative, that would mean that my shots are too much on the left. And now to the expensive metrics. Mean radius. This is the average distance from each shot to the center of the group, and note that this does not necessarily mean the center of the paper. Ballistopedia considers mean radius to be interchangeable with the next one, CEP. CEP stands for circle error probable, and it's the radius of a hypothetical circle centered at the aim point where 50% of your shots landed. Again, smaller is better. Radial SD stands for the standard deviation of the radii, and this is just another proxy for consistency. Next, let's go over some details about the NRA precision pistol competition, starting with the course of fire. This is the course of fire at the NRA precision pistol competition. Match 100 is 270 rounds total, and that's comprised of 90 rounds with each of the 3 calibers, 22, 9mm, and 45. The first string is 20 shots, slow fire, 50 yards with the B6 template, and this is the one that I'm most scared of. I have only ever shot 50 feet, so 50 yards seems very daunting. But I guess the good news is that 50 yards is only worth a third of the total score. The second string is 20 shots timed fire, 25 yards with the BA template. And 25 yards is 67% of the total score, so that's pretty reassuring. And the third string is similar, but instead of timed fire, it's rapid fire. Lastly, the national match course is essentially each of the prior 3 strings, but only half the amount of rounds. If you're looking for the specific match numbers, here they are. You can also find them on the NRA website. I marked the national match courses with asterisks. These are the 2 target papers that are involved in the competition, the B6 and the B8. They are very big. The paper is double the width and double the height of my B3s. The B6 and the B8 are exactly the same, except the B6 has an extra ring that's shaded in as black, and that's to help you see the black circle from a faraway distance. Remember, the B6 is for 50 yards. And lastly, this is the B3 paper, which I have been training on. I have to use this paper because my range only goes to 50 feet. I've been very concerned about doing my training at such a short distance, so I did an Arcman analysis to compare my papers to the competition papers. But to understand the Arcman analysis, let's first understand how to calculate it. Let's first start by calculating the Arcmans of the largest ring of the B3 template. Imagine a triangle drawn between the shooter and the target. The height of the triangle will be the radius of the largest ring, which is 4.16 inches. The width of the triangle is 600 inches, and don't forget to standardize your units. You can derive the angle of the triangle if you remember trigonometry, and if you forgot, tangent is equal to opposite over adjacent. You take 4.16 and divide it by 600, and then you put that number into an arctan calculator. If you no longer have a scientific calculator, you can just go on the internet and use a website like rapidtables.com. The answer that it'll give you will be expressed as degrees, and to convert it into arcmans, all you have to do is multiply it by 60, since an arcman is 1/60th of a degree. So the conclusion here is that the largest ring of the B3 template is 23.8 arcmans, which is roughly 1/3 of a degree. So let's compare the arcmans of the largest rings of the B3 target at 50 feet versus the B6 at 50 yards and the B8 at 25 yards. The B6 largest ring is 18.8 arcmans, which is 21.2% smaller than the B3, so I was pretty justified at being scared of the string. But again, this is only worth 33% of the score. The B8's largest ring is 37.6 arcmans, which is 57.7% larger than the B3. I was very happy to see how generous this was, particularly since this is 2/3 of the total score. This is a comparison of the targets at my end of the bell curve, but let's compare the targets at the other end of the bell curve, the guys who are shooting in the 90s. I repeated this analysis for the radii of the 9 rings. So for the B3, it's 8.8 arcmans. For the B6 at 50 yards, it's 5.3 arcmans, which is way tighter than I have ever shot. Anyway, this 5.3 is almost 40% smaller than the B3, which essentially makes it completely unattainable for me. Luckily, this is only 33% of the total score. Lastly, the B8's 9 ring is 10.6 arcmans, which is over 20% more generous than the B3. In summary, looking at the arcmans and considering the weightings of the score, I think the B3 is comparable to the competition targets, and I feel pretty confident in the B3's ability to predict my performance. My impression of the competition target is that it's easy in the beginners, yet provides significant differentiation for the more skilled shooters. I think we've had enough math for today. If you have any questions, please drop a comment below. Thanks for watching.